35 to 54 years in prison is what my attorney said he could get me as a 19-year-old kid that was the driver in a robbery where no one was even physically touched. Couldn't do it. I remember instantly going into panic in my mind, again, wishing that my mom, anybody could help me, crying out to God. Just, I didn't know what to do in that moment. But I did muster up enough courage to tell my public defender, I can't do that. And what's scary is there's a lot of kids that age in courtrooms, some today, that are being railroaded by their public defenders, prosecutors, etc. And they're not brave enough to say anything, or they just don't know that they can. They don't know their rights, etc. And I said, no, I can't do that. And he said, well, I got to tell them something. And he said, if I tell them the wrong thing, they can end up giving you more. But if I'm doing 35 to 54 years, what's more? If I'm doing 35 to 54 years, what's more? So I took literally like 10 seconds, man. And in that span, I had to figure out how much of my life I'd be willing to sacrifice or give up to the courts, to the judge, to the Commonwealth attorney, to the prosecutor, to make them happy, and how much time I think that I could survive in prison so I could get home to my family, to my freedom, a second chance. And I just told them, I just want to be home before I'm 40. I knew dudes was getting life sentences. I had multiple robberies. I said, just tell them I want to be home before I'm 40. I'm sorry. He said, you sure? I said, yeah. He went out there. About a minute later, the bailiff or whatever, the guard comes to get me, walk me out in the courtroom. He didn't come back. My attorney never came back to tell me everything was going to be okay. He didn't look over to tell me he was going to be okay. But in hindsight, I got to remember there was no plea offer because I didn't cooperate. And when you're in front of the judge, you're in front of the judge. So basically, the conversation he was having with the prosecutor was basically just to get him to agree not to say he wasn't good with that request for the time that I would be requesting as on my sentence. Because the prosecutor would get nasty and say, nah, we offered him 35 to 54. He's asking for 20 or less than. Nah, we want him to have life sentence now. They can get nasty. I remember when I was in the courtroom looking at everybody, and I couldn't see their faces. Everybody was a blur, except for my mom. My mom was like the only ray of light in that place. My mom is not a street person. She doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, barely cusses. And now she's in a courtroom trying to fight for her son's life. And they would ask her to get on the stand and speak about my character, and she was brave. And then they gave me an opportunity to speak about my character. The fact I was in the military, the fact that this is the first time I got in trouble. I didn't have to speak about the case because the rest of the guys they had been sentenced. So what was known was known. And I just told them because they had already, snitched and testified on me that I was the driver. I just said I never left the vehicle, and I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't understand how deep this was. I didn't know because nobody was going to get hurt. Nobody did physically. So he explained mental and emotional trauma. It's the first time I started hearing that. By this time, I'm next to my public defender again. And finally, he says, well, Mr. Willers, I hereby, I'm going to grant your wish. And I remember feeling relieved and saying to myself, I got a second chance. But immediately after, I heard him say, you got 144 years. And I kind of zoned out because I was like, I thought he said I had a second chance. My public defender, he snaps me back in. He tapped me on the shoulder. He said, it's okay. He said, he's suspending everything but 19. I said, what does that mean? He said, that means you got to do 19 years, but you're 19, so you can make it home. He said, you'll do 85% of that, which is a little bit less than that. And I was like, all right. You know what I'm saying? I was like, here we go. And in some way, I was relieved. I now knew what I had to face. But this also meant that I was about to be on my way to prison. And it was going to be a long ride, 17 years. And I knew nothing about it. And now, here we go.